apropos of nothing, I had a good day today. I thought it was going to be a bad day. I went and I visited somebody. I blessed their house, which is, it's a wonderful thing. But I was almost out of gas, and I thought, uh-oh, am I going to make it back? But they told me, they said, just go down Montgomery Road, and you're going to find some cheap gas. They said, go beyond the freeway, just keep going, you'll find it. I thought, oh no. I was on this wild goose chase to find cheap gas. Well, I kept going down Montgomery Road, miles and miles, and I finally found a Speedway down there, $2.95 for gas. Very pleased. That's the cheapest gas I've seen anywhere lately. I was in California just the other day, and gas out there is nearly $4. So, wow. Okay, so I felt like I got a deal. As I said, that's apropos of nothing. So, I just want to share with you my little delight. So today we're talking about human dignity, and it's an important topic because it's going to be the foundation for the rest of our talks on morality. So the human person, of course, is the subject of morality. When we're talking about, well, when are we doing good or when are we doing bad, we're always talking about the human person. Morality for us is not about angelic persons, we're not talking about angels and demons, and we're also not talking about animals. We're not saying, well, let's talk about morality, bad dog, bad Fluffy, get down, bad. And no, that's not what we're doing. We're talking about human beings and their moral goodness or badness. And so what this means is, in order to really understand where morality fits into our lives, the first thing we have to understand is, well, what is a human being? Does a human being have dignity? And how do we come to understand that? So behind me, this is the outline of the talk, and so you can watch it and see if I keep to the outline. So the first thing I thought we should look at are objections. Some people suggest that there is not a stable human dignity that we can look at. They suggest that, in fact, human dignity is something that we really can't hold on to. It's something that slips through our fingers. It's like trying to hold on to water. It's just going to slip away in the long run. And so there are three objections that I wanted to start with to human dignity. So the first objection that some people will raise is that dignity is relative. In other words, they'll say that, of course, when we're talking about dignity, that different societies have different ways of understanding what it means to be a dignified person. And so we can think of lots of different examples of this, can't we? Where you look at those Renaissance paintings. I was in an art gallery recently, and you see these men who, well, once upon a time, I guess they were dignified. They have these ruffled collars, and they're kind of looking off into the distance, and you're seeing their gold grow just by watching it. And they have this sort of starched thing, and it kind of fluffy, and for them that was dignified. But well, for us, it's kind of silly. You wouldn't even wear that for Halloween. So what the first objection to human dignity is people say, well, it's relative. What's dignified back then isn't what's dignified now. So how can there possibly be human dignity? Another kind of objection is that they'll say that dignity seems fungible. I want you to use that word tomorrow at work or school, fungible. It just means that it's substitutable for something else. So for instance, what they'll often point out is that it seems as if dignity can be given away, stolen from us by others, or it can be, say, exchanged for a certain number of goods. So for instance, how many of us have, if you've ever visited a doctor, you've been through indignities. And I don't even have to describe to you what they are. A little embarrassing, just in order to become a Dominican, we have to go through a battery of mental tests and physical tests and so on. And I remember, one of the tests the doctor is giving, and he says, "Oh, well, you have to wait till you're older for this." I'm like, "Well, no, I have to go through it now." So we endure indignities from our doctors. Why? In exchange for better health, right? Well, I'm willing to, do this or that, or have a scope here or there, or, whatnot. And why? Well, because I hope that in the long run, it's going to help, preserve my health, right? So it seems like dignity then is something that I can give away, or let's say somebody does something to you. They seem to rob you of your dignity, don't they? they slap you or something, or they make fun of you in public, and now you resent them. So it seems like dignity then is something that can be eliminated. The third objection to whether or not there's some substantial, long-lasting dignity, the last objection, is that it seems as if there isn't, because dignity can be harmful sometimes. Maybe dignity isn't good because if you have dignity, it can harm others. So for instance, we have the totalitarian dictator. He has a strong sense of his dignity, and why is it that totalitarian dictators always love to have giant posters of themselves? Have you ever noticed that? It's, and as much as possible they have like a mustache or something. Next time you see me different. But so they always have these big posters. Then what happens is you have this dictator's poster, and somebody comes along, and as an act of political defiance, they throw paint on it. And what does the dictator do? Well, he puts that person in prison, and now they're away in a gulag, or they're away making wallets or something for 20 years. Why? Because this dictator's dignity was insulted, and we do not allow that. And so, well, it seems as if then there's not a stable, lasting kind of dignity that's good, because it can harm other people. So, 3 objections. Dignity seems relative according to the culture. Dignity is substitutable, fungible. And then third, dignity seems to be harmful to others. Okay. So what are the responses when we're looking at what dignity is, the human person? How do we respond to these objections? Well, before we get to responding to the precise objections, what I want to do is talk about 3 different kinds of human dignity. So we have 3 right here. Attributed, intrinsic, and acquired. Okay. Okay, so attributed dignity, that's the first that we can look at. And I think a really good example of attributed dignity is actually the story of the emperor's new clothing. Right? You know this story? You're told this when you were a kid. Okay, so there's the story, of course, the emperor comes in, and he says, I want, fancy robes so people can know my dignity, and so then these tailors, they're shysters, and they're clever, and okay, and so they pretend that they're weaving it, and they say, only the wise can see the clothing that we're making, and so the emperor, trying to seem very wise, he says, oh, of course, oh, beautiful, beautiful, and he pays them more money, and so on. And so then more people come, and they're all wanting to seem wise, and they want to be with the emperor, and so they, oh yes, that's beautiful clothing. Look at that cloth. Oh, it's brilliant. Look at those gold threads, and I love the design, and so on. And of course, there's nothing there. And so, of course, the emperor goes along, and now he's wearing his new clothes, which are invisible, except for unless you're wise. And so he thinks that he's very wise, and so he's walking along, and there he is in his favorite canary boxer shorts. And so, then what happens? There's a little kid on the side of the road, and he says, the emperor's naked. Okay. This is attributed dignity. People are attributing dignity to clothing that's not there. Right? It's not there, but they're saying it's there. It's something that they commonly agree on. This is what most people think human dignity is. It's not something that is intrinsic, something that is inherent in the person. They think it's just something that you say. Oh yeah, he has dignity. Or no, he doesn't. It's just something that you attribute to somebody else based on your own opinion or some sort of criteria. So this is then the ultimate problematic way of thinking of human dignity. That we can attribute it to somebody else, and so ultimately we can unattribute it to somebody else. It's something that we give or we take away based on our own feelings. So what this means is that, according to this conception, attributed dignity, this idea is that it's relative to the judgments of others. How do I know my dignity? Well, when people say that I have dignity. How do we know that this little child really has true human dignity? Well, when other people agree that it has it. And so this is the way people think about it. Now, I'm ashamed to say, well, I'm not ashamed. I'm going to name it and claim it. So I was visiting my parents, and one of my parents, I won't say which one, really enjoys watching this reality TV show about, I forget what it's called, it's about like two princes. They're princes, but they're in disguise. Have you heard about this? So they're like real royalty, except they're from some European countries, and they come to the U.S. and now they just look like ordinary guys. Okay, and now what they're trying to do is they're trying to find a wife. They're trying to find a wife back in their home country. They couldn't find one, so now they they throw their dignity away so they can be on this reality TV show. And so I'm there with my parents, and I decide, okay, I'm gonna watch TV for a little bit with them. I haven't watched it since last year, and so there's this Indian prince there, and he's complaining to the two other princes. One is English and the other is German or something, and the Indian guy he's saying, back in my country, everybody thought that I was wonderful, but now that I come, nobody wants to date me. And what he started to realize is that he had attributed dignity, right? People gave him dignity, they gave him respect, they thought he was honorable and worthy of honor and so on, when they thought he was a prince. Now he's in the U.S., any other guy, maybe a little overweight, So he's not getting the respect that he was used to. Why? Because royalty is an attributed dignity. It's something that's given by common conception, it's given by the agreement of others, and now we're going to attribute it to you. But we all know that royalty can come and go. And sometimes it's just what people say you are. If you're in the French Revolution and they decide that there's no more royalty, well, then all of your royal dignity has passed away. So as I said, what happens is that people start to think that this is the only kind of dignity that people have. You only have dignity because other people say you do. Okay? It's only attributed dignity. You're nothing by yourself unless other people think that you are. So that leads me then to the next kind of dignity, which is intrinsic dignity. Okay? So attributed dignity is given to us by others. Intrinsic dignity is what a thing has by its own nature. Dignity given by its nature. So now we have to think about what is a nature. What is a nature? I don't mean like, I took a walk in nature. I'm using the word slightly differently. So here's an example. So since we're on the theme of kings and so on. So if we think about a crown, okay? I have a little, ta-da. Okay, so now you have a crown. You have a crown on. And you say, well, what's the nature of a crown? Well, it's more than the sum of its parts, right? It's more than just a piece of gold, because we can say a ring is also made of gold, or my teeth are made of gold, but they're not a crown. Okay, so it's more than just gold. That's the material. And we would say the crown has a specific function. What does a crown do? Well, a crown sits on the head of a king or a queen. That's its job. So that's how we start to identify the nature of a crown. We say that ultimately the nature is the essence of a thing. What is it? It's a crown. Here's another example. Let's say a throne. Okay, a throne is something made out of wood, and you say, okay, well, what's the nature of a throne? Well, it's something that kings sit on. It's not simply any old piece of wood. It's a particular type of wood, right? Okay, so it's a throne. He sits on it, and he has a crown on his head. So now we know something about what a nature is. And a nature is going to help us identify the essence or the substance of a thing. So we're getting into a little bit detail, but okay. So I have the crown. Now think about the crown for a second. It's shaped, it's round. We can put different jewels on the crown. Well, we just, conquered another country. I'm going to put a little jewel in my crown. And, mock the other country. And, we have a throne. Well, it's getting a little, beat up and dented, and, the royal dog has done things on it, and so we're going to repaint it. Okay, well, what have we done? We haven't changed the essence of the throne. All we've done is we've changed its accidents. Its color, perhaps. Maybe we can even change its shape a little bit, make it a little wider when the king gains weight. So what we can talk about the nature of the throne, something to be sat on, And then we can talk about its qualities, its color, its shape, and so on. Okay? All right, so how does this help us to see human dignity? Human dignity is not dependent on the outward appearances. Human dignity is not dependent on the color of a person. It's not dependent on the shape of a person. It's not even dependent on the age of a person. Why? Because we're saying intrinsic dignity has to do with the substance of the person, the essence, that which is fundamental to the person. Just as the crown can change its shape or color, or the throne can change its shape or color, well, the human being can change shape or color, right? Depending on circumstances. You go and get a tan, you're still the same person. You just have changed your color. If you're like me, you've just gone from white to red. So I've changed my qualities, but I haven't changed who I am. Still Father Ezra. Of course, when I get a tan, it's just from here up. So what does this tell us then about intrinsic dignity? Well, it tells us something different than attributed dignity. Remember I said attributed dignity, when people say that you have it, it's something that can change depending on people's opinions. But intrinsic dignity, it's stable. You always have it. Why? Because it's you. It's dignity insofar as you are a human being. Are you a human being? Yes, you have this kind of dignity. And so it's not by virtue of social standing, it's not by virtue of ability, it's not by virtue of something you've performed or made. It's prior to human attribution, prior to any acquired quality. It's something that exists not by human choice, but by human nature. Okay? And we can say further on, this kind of dignity is personal. So what's the difference? So personal, it means that it comes from and adheres in a person. The human person is able to have a kind of a dignity that is special to us because we're people. And so in this way, we can say that as long as the thing exists as such, it has that kind of dignity. As long as the throne is really there, it's going to have whatever dignity a throne has. If I burn it up and it turns into ashes, well, clearly it can't have the dignity anymore, it's gone. And similarly, as long as you are identifiably a human being, you have that dignity too. So it's kind of nice to know. Okay, now the third kind of dignity that I wanted to talk about is acquired dignity. Okay, so let's go back to the king, and let's say that the king has he's that emperor with no clothes, right? And everybody's laughing at him. He has intrinsic dignity because he is a human being, but he lost some kind of dignity because he's walking around in his boxers. Now, how can he get that dignity back? Well, by putting something on. So when he's walking around in his boxers, he's still a human being. He still has human dignity intrinsically. His very nature is still there. And now he can acquire acquired dignity. It's a secondary kind. It's of lesser importance. And he can gain that. So acquired dignity is something that we can gain, and we can gain it by our own efforts, or perhaps somebody can help us out with it. So let's, the king is going bald. Well, I know some people would mock him for that, and he would say, well, no, it's the shiny dome of wisdom or something. Okay, well, so we're not going to argue about whether or not that's gain or loss of dignity, but we can say that there are certain things that we can do that can help us to gain a certain kind of dignity. Okay? So this sort of acquired dignity, it's founded upon nature. It's an expression of who you really are. It's the growth of your potential. It's the perfection of the human being. And so, how can you gain dignity in this way? Well, become more virtuous. In this way, you can say, I'm a human being. I have certain dignity that's always mine. But now, through the exercise of virtue, by trying to do good for others, then, right, don't we honor people who do good? This is why we give, medals to people and why we recognize some as saints. It's acquired dignity. Now, of course, if you're a saint, it's acquired through your effort, but it's given to you primarily through grace. So acquired dignity, then, isn't our nature. We would call it second nature. And so you can also lose dignity in this way too. So for instance, let's say you have a vice, somebody says, I just can't stop stealing. I've tried, and I get into that grocery store and I see that Mars bar and my hand starts to twitch and I can't stop myself. Okay? Well, you've lost a kind of dignity. You're still a human being. You still have intrinsic dignity, but you've lost a kind of dignity because now there's something misshapen, right? And we all know that. When you do better, when you try to overcome that vice, you can acquire that dignity again. And so this is why, ultimately, we would say that acquired dignity is only recognizable at the end of life. Because we all have peaks and valleys, we all go up and down in terms of how much dignity we might have acquired or lost. And this is why Aristotle, and it's actually quoted in the Bible, says, "Call no one happy until he's dead." Oh my, I have to wait that long? Why? Well, because what you acquire or what you lose, we don't really know what the balance sheet is, ultimately. We're not quite really sure where we are in terms of what we've acquired or lost. Okay, isn't this interesting? So now, in light of these three types of dignity, I think we can answer those three initial objections. So the first objection was, he said, well, some dignity seems relative. If you're a certain type of tribesman, it's dignified to have feathers coming out from your head, and this is dignified because it means I've conquered the animal. And then if you're in another society, the ruffled scarf, that shows dignity. We would say, okay, well, the kind of dignity he's talking about is either attributed or acquired, right? It's attributed to you because you have the ruffle, and the ruffle means that I'm a magistrate. Or maybe it's acquired because, you only get the ruffle after you kill so many people. Oh my, he's quite a swordsman. Okay, and then the next objection is that it seems like dignity can be given away or stolen or exchanged for other goods. Well, that's kind of true insofar as acquired dignity can be given away, right? So, this is actually the premise of most reality TV shows, is that you're willing to trade your dignity for fame, your 15 minutes of fame, and maybe a product endorsement if you're lucky. So it is something that can be hawked on eBay for a little while, but whatever is acquired through your efforts, it's different from your intrinsic dignity, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You can get old, nobody remembers your cologne anymore, but you're still a human being. And then finally, dignity can be harmful. The totalitarian dictator who, gets angry because you drew a mustache when he didn't have one. That's not the style I wanted. We would say, well, that's not true dignity at all. If there's this false kind of dignity, it's not really dignity. All right, okay, so with respect to this, before we move on to the theological perspective, the last thing I wanted to say about dignity is that I think these three types can help us to recognize sometimes what happens in ourselves. Don't you notice sometimes like you feel at one time or another more dignity or less? Sometimes somebody will shame you and you feel worthless. And then you get that phone call and you're wonderful and you're like, I am wonderful. All in a matter of 10 minutes. What this shows us is that how we feel about our dignity is not the same as what our dignity actually is. Okay? How I feel about myself, I feel wonderful, I feel great, I'm going to make a giant, poster of myself, I'm going to put it up on skyscrapers and force people to bow down to it. That may not actually tell me anything about my intrinsic dignity. It may not tell me anything about my acquired dignity. It may not even tell me about attributed dignity. People are pretending that I'm dignified, but that's only so long as dictator Father Ezra is around. And then as soon as I turn my back, they kind of laugh at me. So how I feel about my dignity really only gives us the slightest indication of where things actually fall out. Okay? So we always retain our natural dignity, no matter what we choose to do or whatever happens to us. We always retain that intrinsic dignity. Is that a beautiful thought? Okay. So are there any questions at this point before we move forward? Just any questions about that? Pretty straightforward, right?
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now what I want to do is put all of that into the perspective that we find in sacred scripture. And that's going to tell us about the first man, Adam. What dignity did he have? And then the second man, Christ. We say the new Adam. Okay? So let's just analyze the three types of dignity that I've just talked about in terms of these two persons. Okay, so first, Adam. Attributed dignity. Well, there was nobody else around. God did not create Eve to admire Adam. It was the other way around, wasn't it? Adam saw Eve and he said, "At last, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bones." Wow, there's Eve. So Eve had attributed dignity. But it was actually, what Adam was pointing to was her intrinsic dignity, wasn't he? Because he was pointing to what she was. He was recognizing something within her. She had dignity whether or not Adam recognized it. If he went to sleep, she still had it. Okay? So the intrinsic dignity that they had comes to them from a share in God's dignity. It says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, that they were created in the image and likeness of God. The image and likeness of God. What does that mean? It means that God has infinite dignity, infinite worth. He's worthy to be praised. He is worthy to be honored. And why? Because he's so good. Because he is our creator. Because of who he is. And so what God decided to do when he created us, Adam and Eve in the beginning, is he decided to share that worthiness, that loveliness, that goodness with his creatures. And so, because God shared that, they were made in his image and likeness. Now they have dignity also. And this is why we would say, intrinsically, human beings are the highest of all creation. They are the most dignified, the loftiest of all creation. The most perfect thing in nature, St. Thomas Aquinas says. Okay, so there's the intrinsic dignity there of Adam and Eve. And then acquired dignity. Well, in the case of Adam and Eve, there was dignity lost. Remember how that happened? What happened? They sinned. They sinned. Yep. They were told that they could acquire more dignity. In fact, our Lord said, "You shall till the ground, and you shall have dominion over it." He was saying, you were created good in my image and likeness, and now go and increase that good. But instead of doing that, well, they lost it. Okay, now what happens then with the second Adam, Christ? Well, attributed dignity. When he was born, the angels came and said, "Glory to God in the highest, and peace to people on earth of goodwill." And then they give him lots of names. He shall be called the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He shall be called Savior of the world. All this is attributed to him, right? The angels are actually proclaiming his praise. Before he was born, the angel appeared to Mary and said, he shall be called the Son of the Most High. So Christ has a lot of attributed dignity because people are recognizing his intrinsic dignity, right? So attributed dignity isn't something bad. It's just something that people say about you. And it may or may not be true. In the case of Christ, though, of course it was true. So he has great attributed dignity. People gave it to him at first. And then, why? His intrinsic dignity, Christ was completely without sin. He was completely perfect. Every movement of Christ's heart was a movement of love. Every thought was one of wisdom. Every action was one of virtue. So,